Welcome back.
And now we have an exclusive report on India Infra Vision 2020.
As India's economic growth picks up momentum and make rapid strides on the global canvas, the need for addressing the deficiencies in the infrastructure sector for long-term sustainable economic growth is also being realized. There's also growing consensus that improvement in infrastructure can have a strong impact on poverty alleviation and introducing supply-side constraints of primary commodities through proper mobilization of resources. It is well accepted that the goal of long-term sustainable economic growth is not achievable unless infrastructure improves. Lack of proper infrastructure has been a limiting factor for growth for many years. Sectors such as power, rail, roads, ports, etc. need to improve substantially if the government wants to meet the rising demand from resurgent India.
With a view to accelerate infrastructure development in the country, Government of India has planned huge capital spending on infrastructure development. The government has planned estimated capital outlay of $500 billion over the 12th five-year plan. The resource will be mobilized partly from the public sector funding and partly from private investment through PPP.
I see that the progress now, especially in the infrastructure sector, will be much faster. Of late, there have been turbulent times where there has been a slowdown in the infrastructure sector due to various reasons, due to increasing interest rates, due to political uncertainty. There has been a slowdown. But the government has already started taking steps like allowing non-banking financial institutions to invest in bonds of infrastructure, allowing infrastructure companies to go in for ECB borrowings. You see a lot of projects coming up on PPP basis. The government has already announced that. So I see a substantial amount of traction coming in the infrastructure sector in the next 6 to 8 months.
The government's strategy of attracting private investment into infrastructure sector has paid rich dividend to the government in terms of huge participation of private investment in infrastructure projects. Involvement of private investment not only brought sufficient funding requirements to the sector, but it has also other advantages like the improvement in the competitiveness and more efficient execution.
The construction and the infrastructure sector in last more than a decade now has undergone a very radical change. Now, India, we have an overall development activities, whether in all the sectors, whether it's port, airports, road, highways, and housing, IT sector. So it's an all-around development. So all-around development means a lot of investment which has started coming up. Now the investments again, it's just not from the government side. There is a lot of investments coming from the private sector.
Sector which involves highest private participation includes ports, airports and power, which involve private participation to the tune of 73.3%, 60.9% and 50% respectively. On the other side, sector which involve least private investments are water sanitation and railways, which involve private participation to the tune of only 2.7% and 19.6% respectively of total proposed outlay during the 11th five-year plan.
Every PPP project is not interesting, from the developer's point of view. So the government has to give SOPs, and they have been doing that in terms of whether it's an annuity project or it's sometimes they ask you what grant they can give you, viability funding, etc., etc. So I think they're on the right track on that. But what I think the government will have and the regulators will have to do is to sort out the land issues before they even tender out projects. Because what kills the business is you think that you're going to bid a job and complete it in 2 years or 3 years. But when you go on the ground and you stay on for 5 years or 6 years, it's not benefiting anybody. And it is really difficult for the companies to be able to sustain that kind of a loss.
With more and more private players involved in the infrastructure project, concept of bill, operate and transfer model is gradually replacing cash contracts. In BOT model, private players infuse the capital in the projects and develop the assets, and in return they give revenue for these created infrastructure assets for a certain agreed period called concession period. The concession period varies from project to project.
The PPP module is a very successful module. It has been tried worldwide successfully. If you look at Malaysia, most of the roads are on PPP. If you look at the West, that is the US, even irrigation, water supply, power, roads is all on PPP. Therefore, it's a time-tested module, and I think that will be successful in India, in India also. But yes, we will have to look at interest rates also, because increased interest rates may make many of the projects very unviable.
In BOT project, private developers require huge investment in initial years or during construction period of the assets. However, these infrastructure projects are highly leveraged by debt-equity ratio as high as 80:20. In some BOT project, private players required to pay upfront bill in lieu of the project. However, nowadays concept of revenue sharing with respective government authority is becoming more popular than one-time upfront payment.
The one element which can come about is the reverse auctioning method, where government could develop the project and then auction it off in terms of revenue collection on a PPP model. That could eliminate some of those more riskier projects, if I may use the word so, to achieve better results. So I think some projects where viability gap funding remains to be very high, government could first implement it and then auction it.
In revenue sharing model, concessionaries have to share revenue generated from the project with respective government authorities for a certain agreed period. Currently, airport project follows the revenue sharing model, but recently NHAI followed the same for the first time while awarding the Dahisar-Surat Road BOT project. Experts feel that going forward, all infrastructure projects under PPPs would shift gradually towards revenue sharing model, especially in airports, roads and port projects.
Infrastructure investment requires huge initial capital outlay, which is considered to be a big hurdle in the past due to prohibition or lesser participation on infrastructure projects. Even in the present situation, it is not possible on part of the government to provide the infrastructure on its own. Consequently, the government is encouraging more private sector participation through PPP concept, which is fast evolving in all the aspects of infrastructure development. It's time for another short break. Keep watching Power News.